So, hello there, and welcome back to yet another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spike Knight, and in these podcasts, I like talking all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm reviewing Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. But, just before I do that, I should say what I say at the start of every podcast I do, which is, if you are watching this if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello to my viewers, but if you prefer to listen to your podcast on Spotify, well in luck, as you can also listen to this podcast on Spotify at Night of the Movies on that platform. And if you are already watching this podcast, and if you are already listening to this podcast, on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check out this podcast visually. Yes, you can watch this podcast on my YouTube channel at Night of the Movies on that platform as well. Likewise, wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the podcast, of course, and please leave me with some feedback on things to improve on in future podcasts, because there are always things to improve on, and feedback is, as ever, much appreciated. So, let's get into it, shall we? Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. So this is the fourth Ghostbusters movie in the franchise in this series of Ghostbusters films, because this film is canon with the original Ghostbusters from 1984, Ghostbusters 2, which I think was 1989, and Ghostbusters Afterlife, which came out in 2021. But it isn't canon with the female Ghostbusters film, which came out in 2016. That film's not canon with the main Ghostbusters movies. It's almost like an Elseworlds Ghostbusters film. But anyway, this film, as already mentioned, is canon with the previous three Ghostbusters films, which have included the main cast playing their roles, the original cast playing their roles. And the last time they did that was in Ghostbusters Afterlife, and I really enjoyed that film. When I saw it the first time, I couldn't wipe the grin off my face whilst I was watching it. The second time I watched it, that grin wore off a bit, and I did notice some big problems with the film. But then I watched it again recently to, refamiliarize myself with that film for this movie, because this movie is a straight up continuation from Ghostbusters Afterlife. And I rewatched Afterlife again, and I liked it a lot more than I did the second time rewatching it on Netflix a good couple of months ago now. So anyway, I was a big fan of Ghostbusters Afterlife, and that is one of the reasons I was looking forward to this film so much, because I've already mentioned it's a direct continuation from Ghostbusters Afterlife with the main characters, and apparently the original characters, the older cast, the legacy cast, if you will, from the original two Ghostbusters movies, who made a cameo in Ghostbusters Afterlife at the end of that film, they were going to have bigger roles in this movie, and I liked hearing that. I liked that they were apparently going to be actual characters, and all that made this one of my most anticipated movies for this year, because yes, I knew I wasn't going to get The Godfather, or I don't know, even the original Ghostbusters, when I was going to watch this at the cinema, coming into this year, coming into 2024, I knew this film wasn't going to be a masterpiece. But I was looking forward to it, because sometimes you just want to watch a fun and enjoyable blockbuster at the cinema. You don't necessarily want to be challenged all the time at the cinema. You don't want to have to sit there and almost be tense the entire time whilst you're watching something. Sometimes you just want to go to cinema and have a good time, and that's what Ghostbusters Afterlife was for me. And because this film is a direct continuation from Ghostbusters Afterlife, I was hoping to get that same feel. Hoping to go to the cinema and to watch Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, the fourth installment in the Ghostbusters franchise, and just have a really good time. Smile, laugh, maybe feel a bit creeped out, and just, come out the cinema with a smile on my face. And after coming back from the cinema just a couple of hours ago now, after seeing this film just a couple of hours ago, here are my thoughts on it. I enjoyed this film. I enjoyed it more than I was expecting to, because reviews for this film recently have been, quite negative, leaning on the negative. And I was going into this film thinking, oh no, it's going to be another bad Ghostbusters movie. But actually, it wasn't bad. I had a good time watching this film. I had a smile on my face throughout most of the film. Some of the film didn't really work for me. I'll get onto that a bit later. And as I was hoping it would, as I was hoping this film would, it made me smile. It made me laugh. I laughed more in this film than I expected to. Paul Rudd, the fact that they got Paul Rudd in the Ghostbusters franchise is perfect casting, in my opinion. And there were so many moments with his character, what's he called? Gary Grierson, I think that's what the character's called. With his character, where I just couldn't stop laughing throughout the film. And, it did have a lot of funny moments. Not all the comedy worked, but most of the comedy worked. Some of the comedy did fall flat on its face, but most of the comedy did work, as I've already said twice now. And at the same time, it did have a few creepy moments, particularly with the villain, which actually looked a bit like Slender Man, following on that sort of imagery, and it creeped me out in a couple of moments. There were moments with the ghosts, kind of like in the first two Ghostbusters movies, where you watch them, and actually the ghosts are quite creepy, and there are some creepy aspects to those movies which make them proper Ghostbusters films, similar to Afterlife as well. So it did have those creepy moments in the ghost part of the film. And you know what? I walked out of the cinema after watching this film with a spring in my step. And I was humming the Ghostbusters song, which is what you want from a Ghostbusters movie. It was enjoyable, and it felt like a Ghostbusters film. And I should say, because I haven't said this yet, I really enjoy the first Ghostbusters film. Hence my t-shirt today. I've got the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, the huge Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from the original Ghostbusters, which is just genius, by the way. Just that moment with this huge Stay Puft Marshmallow Man is one of my favourite moments in cinema history. But anyway, I've got that on my t-shirt because I really like the original Ghostbusters. I don't love it as much as some people do, but I think it's a great film. And you know what? I also really enjoyed Ghostbusters 2. I think it's a good sequel, and as I mentioned, I enjoyed Ghostbusters Afterlife, and I think Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is a worthy fourth installment to this franchise. That being said, it does have some problems though, and it did feel like fan fiction for the good aspects and for the bad aspects. Sometimes fan fiction gets a bad rap. Some people talk about fan fiction in a negative way, but in reality, I've read some fan fiction that's actually been pretty good for some of my favourite TV shows and films. I've read some fan fiction which has been absolute pants as well, but I've read some fan fiction which has felt like I'm, reading the characters, you know what I mean? And reading the characters that I have come to love in the film or TV show that I'm reading the fan fiction from. And here, this film felt like fan fiction for all the good reasons. It felt like fan fiction because in a positive way, because it felt like this film was coming from somebody. It was the filmmakers behind this movie, the director, who is not Jason Reitman this time. Jason Reitman, the son of Ivan Reitman, who directed the original two Ghostbusters movies. Jason Reitman directed Ghostbusters Afterlife, the third installment, but Jason Reitman didn't return to direct this one. He is now producing it, and he is credited as a co-writer. It's Gil Keenan this time, who hasn't directed anything too notable, by the way. But it felt like Gil Keenan was a big Ghostbusters fan. That's the point I wanted to make. It felt like he was a big Ghostbusters fan. It felt like the filmmakers behind this film were all fans of the original Ghostbusters movie, and I mean that in the best way. It feels like it's coming from some people who actually like the property, who like what they are doing, and it felt true to these characters. All the character decisions from the original cast, from the likes of Dan Aykroyd's character, Ernie Hudson's character, Annie Potter's character, or Bill Murray's characters, felt in line with their characters in the first two films and their cameo in Ghostbusters Afterlife. So that's why it feels like good fan fiction. It feels like good fan fiction because it feels in line with the other three main Ghostbusters films. But where it feels kind of like negative, kind of like the bad connotations of fan fiction, is that it isn't needed. This film is not necessary. And I had a mate say to me a couple of months ago, because we're talking about this new Ghostbusters movie coming out, because it's obviously prior to the release of this film. I was saying to him, are you excited for it? Because he's a big Ghostbusters fan. He said, not really, because Ghostbusters Afterlife it felt like the perfect end to this franchise. And now they're continuing it, for money? I was like, well, hopefully not. Hopefully there's going to be a reason this film has to exist. There's a good reason this film exists when I go and watch it at the cinema. But I didn't get that from this film, though. And I wish that I did. And it is... If you wanted to finish... If you weren't interested in watching this movie, and you were a Ghostbusters fan, you thought that Ghostbusters Afterlife was the perfect end to the Ghostbusters franchise, you don't need to watch this film. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad movie, I'm not saying that at all, but it feels more like a footnote. It does feel more like fan fiction. It does feel more like, oh yeah, well, this is what happened to the characters after the events of Ghostbusters Afterlife, but it's not actually that important. It doesn't develop on anything too much from Ghostbusters Afterlife. It doesn't change the way you're going to view that story. It doesn't change the way you're going to view the other two Ghostbusters movies beforehand. It feels like fan fiction because in a way that it isn't necessary. This film didn't need to be made. This story in Ghostbusters Frozen Empire didn't need to be told, and I wish that it did. Much like a lot of fan fiction I've read, you're reading it and it's good, but you're also thinking, yeah, I can see why they didn't make this into something I would watch. And I did kind of have that feeling with Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, but they have made it into a film. They made it into a blockbuster that is probably going to get a lot of money, but I kind of wish they chose a different story to tell, because I don't know if this was the right story to tell, and it's got a lot of ideas in there, some ideas which are really good, but it does feel a little like they're throwing things at the wall because they can, and because they're continuing on this franchise, and I'm not sure if they needed to. It does feel unnecessary, like a lot of fan fiction does. And sticking on with my criticisms, the characters in this film, there's too many of them. There's too many characters in this film, because not only do you have most, if not pretty much all of the cast of Ghostbusters Afterlife return. I mean, not only the family from Ghostbusters Afterlife, but the two friends that the main characters have. What's one of them called? Lucky, I think the character's called. And there's another character called Podcast there. They were in Ghostbusters Afterlife. They were quite fun to watch in Ghostbusters Afterlife, and they're back in this film, but there's not really any point to them. And yeah, I'm not really sure why they're in this film. They felt like they were in there because, oh, it's a sequel to Ghostbusters Afterlife, but they didn't need to be in there, you know. And those are characters you could have taken out alongside James Acast's character. Listen, I never thought I would see James Acast, who's a famous British comedian. I never thought I would see him in a big blockbuster, and I actually found his performance to be wonderful in this film. I found it delightful to watch, and I love that he's in this film. I love that he's in there. But he didn't need to be in there. He didn't need to be in this film. Kumail Nanjiani's character, I didn't feel was needed either. He felt more forced than James Acast's character. At least James Acast's character felt, well, it felt like he fit in with the story at least a little bit. But Kumail Nanjiani's character feels out the way of everything, and I didn't really love what Kumail Nanjiani was doing. I'm a fan of Kumail Nanjiani. I love The Big Sick, and I love, you know, even in the bad films he's been in, he's normally a standout. But here, he's not a standout, and I felt his performance was misdirected. I didn't like what he was going for, and some of the comedic delivery with him felt rushed, even though he's a comedy actor, and I've seen him in some stuff that I found him really funny in, but I didn't love what he was doing here. I didn't hate him in the film, but his character felt forced, and his performance didn't really work for me. And so, yeah, there's characters in this film which aren't needed. There are too many characters, and I would have taken out. I wouldn't have had Podcast return. I wouldn't have had Lucky return. I wouldn't have had James Acast in the film, although I love that he's in it, but I wouldn't have had him in there, if I'm, you know, being honest, because his character didn't do loads, and I wouldn't have had Kumail Nanjiani's character in there. I would have revolved it more around the main characters we met in Ghostbusters Afterlife, the family that we met in Ghostbusters Afterlife, and how their lives are like now when they have moved from where they were living in Ghostbusters Afterlife, how their lives are in New York when they're living at the Ghostbusters, the Ghostbusters base, let's call it that. I forgot what it's called now off the top of my head, but I think the film would have been better if it just focused on their lives, because it feels like it's trying to do so much, and it does sometimes lose focus on the family. Like, this film still focuses on that family from Ghostbusters Afterlife, but it doesn't have the same focus that it did in Afterlife. In this film, the family stuff sort of feels like an afterthought, and I would have liked there to be more focus on their family. We actually get to see the dynamics of them. We actually get to see how their lives are affected now they've had to move. Now they've had to move to a different state in America, but we don't really get to see that. And the family dynamic and the the family dynamic, which was so much at the centre of Ghostbusters Afterlife, isn't at the centre of this film, and I didn't love that. The character development, there ain't much of it. There ain't much character development. I would have liked there to be more. Particularly with... Well, there is with McKenna Grace's character, I'll take that. I was about to say there's no character development with her character, but there is. But with Finn Wolfhard's character, Finn Wolfhard, which many people might know from Stranger Things, he was also in It Chapter 1 and 2. I really like him as an actor. I'm looking forward to seeing him in more stuff. He didn't need to be in this film. His character arc is that at the start of the movie, he finds Slimer in the attic of the Ghostbusters base. And then by the end of the film, he comes to like Slimer. And I'm like, okay, really? That's what you're going for there? And Kerry Coon's character, the mother in this family, feels pretty much like she is sitting on the bench throughout most of the film. She does have some moments, but I would have liked to see more from her. And Paul Rudd probably has the most screen time out of the family, but I didn't really feel any character development with him. I mean, there is a little bit of character development with him in his relationship with McKenna Grace's character, but I would have liked to see more of that. I would have liked that to be more of a focus, because I won't give too much details because this is a non-spoiler review. Well, for the most part, I'm not going to give any big spoilers away. There's something that happens at the end of the film between those two characters, and it didn't feel quite as earnest as I wanted it to. My heart wasn't warmed when that thing happened between those two characters. If you've seen the film, you probably know what I'm talking about. And I would have liked it to feel earned. Also, the pacing is all over the place in this film. There are times where it feels rushed, and there are times when it feels like it feels overlong, and there are these dull can't pronounce the word, exposition dumps. There you go, got it there in the end. There is quite a bit of dull exposition dumping in this film, and I don't mind exposition in films if it's done well, if it's done in quite an exciting way. But here, it felt as about half an hour to 40 minutes of this film, which is dedicated to explaining where the villain is coming from. And at that point, I was starting to think to myself, oh god, this film's starting to slip away from me. And I'm a fan of the Ghostbusters franchise. I enjoy watching these films. They're fun and quite funny films and, entertaining to watch. But this one is starting to slip away from me, and that was in the first hour, but then it came back in the second hour. The film became exciting again, but the pacing is a little all over the shop. Yeah, there are parts which feel too long, and there are parts which feel rushed. Like, we have to get to the next bit just like that, but I would have liked there to be more breathing space. The film wasn't quite as exciting as I wanted it to be. The opening of the film had me going, oh wow, this is actually something I'm going along with this, and this is quite entertaining. And not only is it actually quite entertaining, it's wildly entertaining, but the film didn't keep that pace going throughout, that breakneck pace. I wanted it to. I wanted this film to be more exciting and just overall to feel more necessary. It doesn't feel like it needs to exist. And I know why this film exists. If you don't know why this film exists, I'm sorry, but you come on. You've got to understand why this film exists. It exists because of money. And they would, don't get me wrong, all sequels exist for money. Why did they make Ghostbusters 2? Why did they make Ghostbusters Afterlife? It was to make money. But this film, I know why they made it. They made it to make money. But I would have liked there to be more of a reason behind this story happening after Ghostbusters Afterlife. I would have liked there to be a proper reason that this film exists, whereas it did feel like fan fiction. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't mean that in a totally bad way. But I also think that it does have some of those negative connotations of fan fiction where it doesn't feel necessary. It feels like an extension of the story from Ghostbusters Afterlife, which we didn't necessarily need. That all being said, I had a good time watching this film, though. I had a good time watching it. And you know what actually really impressed me with this film? With the special effects. I mean, the CGI is notable, but the film doesn't overuse CGI as many big blockbusters do nowadays. And actually, the special effects impressed me quite a bit. The Slimer's back in this film. I think Slimer, I haven't seen the first two Ghostbusters movies in quite a while, but Slimer, I'm pretty sure, was in the first two Ghostbusters films. He wasn't in Ghostbusters Afterlife, but he returns here. And Slimer, he looked like he did back in 1984 with the original Ghostbusters, and and in 1989 with Ghostbusters 2. He had that same look, that almost tangible look where it feels like you could touch him. You know, even so, it looked at times like it was being brought to life by CGI. It also looked like he wasn't. Maybe the CGI accentuated to make him look more real in this film, but the look of Slimer reminded me of the look of him in the first two Ghostbusters movies, and I liked that quite a lot. The special effects, I mean, not only with Slimer, but also with the villain in some parts, with the main ghost villain, were actually quite impressive in my opinion. I thought the special effects really worked in this film. Plus, I really like the cast. I know the characters were likeable. I may have thought that there were too many characters, but they were likeable still. You know, the main cast that we see in this film, the family that are crossing over from Ghostbusters Afterlife to this movie, all the cast that play them did a wonderful job. McKenna Grace is totally believable in this role as Phoebe Spengler, the granddaughter of Egon Spengler from the original Ghostbusters, who was played by Harold Ramis in that film. She's totally believable in this role, and you believe her as somebody, as a teenager, who's going through a rough patch in her life. Because that's what you see her going through in this film. Yeah, McKenna Grace plays it very well. And thank God for Paul Rudd. Paul Rudd is an absolute joy in this film, and he is so funny to watch. I was thinking at times, if it wasn't Paul Rudd saying his lines, would I find him that funny? But the fact is, it is Paul Rudd saying his lines. So I quit asking that question to myself after I asked it once, because Paul Rudd is in this film. He's perfectly cast in it, and he is so funny to watch. And Kerry Coon is wonderful, and so is Finn Wolfhard. And I loved seeing the original cast come back with bigger roles. I mean, not all of them have huge roles. From what I remember, Bill Murray's only in like 2 or 3 scenes in the film, but I liked him in there. I know some people have complained about Bill Murray in this film, and it does at times seem like he doesn't quite know what set he's on. It seems like he's only just woken up from a sleep, but he made me smile when he was on screen, and he made me laugh. And Bill Murray is one of my favourite comedy actors. I know he's done some controversy. I know there's some controversy surrounding him over the past couple of years, but I still like him whatever I see him in. He's one of those actors which always makes me smile. His comedy always works for me. Probably ever since I saw the original Ghostbusters, and seeing that character back, yeah, did make me smile. I'm not gonna lie. I liked Bill Murray in this film quite a bit. I also like Dan Aykroyd in this film quite a bit, because Dan Aykroyd doesn't feel like he's acting in this film whatsoever. It feels like Dan Aykroyd is playing himself, and I mean that in the best way possible. Dan Aykroyd is a joy to watch in this film, as is Annie Potts, who was receptionist in the first 2 Ghostbusters movies. I love her role in this film because she actually gets to wear the Ghostbusters costume, the classic Ghostbusters uniform. You know, she gets to wear that in this film, and I loved that. I loved seeing that she had a bigger role rather than the very small cameo she had in Ghostbusters Afterlife. Yeah, I liked seeing her in the film. And Ernie Hudson, who has aged like fine wine, is great in this film. I really liked seeing him in this too. Ernie Hudson, you can tell he's got a lot of... He's still invested into this franchise, which I really like, because he's in his 70s. He may even be in his late 70s. Doesn't look it, by the way, but he may even be in his late 70s, and it still feels like he has something invested in this franchise. So, same with Dan Aykroyd. Not so much with Bill Murray, who has spoken about his love-hate relationship with this franchise in the past, but Ernie Hudson and Dan Aykroyd felt like they had quite a bit invested in this franchise when they're on screen. I enjoyed watching them. And William Atherhall, I don't know how you pronounce his name, but he was in the original Ghostbusters. He was a character that Bill Murray says to, yes, it is true, this man has no dick. You know, in the original one of the classic lines from that film. He's back in this movie. Didn't need to be there, but I like seeing him, you know. I like seeing him back, you know. I would like to see Rick Moranis now. I don't know if he will be in a Ghostbusters film now, because I don't know if they'll make another one after this. I don't know if this film will make enough money to warrant a 5th Ghostbusters film, but still, I would have liked to see Rick Moranis in there, because Rick Moranis in the first 2 Ghostbusters movies, he's one of the best characters in those films, and, well, he doesn't make an appearance in this film. And I kind of thought it was going to. And actually, sticking on with missed opportunities for a sec, I saw some marketing for this film. It was just an image, but it was a scene between Bill Murray and Paul Rudd's characters in this film. And that scene doesn't actually happen in the movie. And I wanted to see that scene happen because those two are the funniest actors in this film, at least for me. And there isn't a scene between them. There isn't even an interaction between them in this film. It felt that must have been a delete scene, and I thought that was a missed opportunity, especially when you marketed the film with that image. That's one of your main images for the marketing in this film. It felt like that was a missed opportunity not to have those two on screen, because I was looking forward to seeing that interaction, and it didn't happen. It's, you know, marketing which is trying to lure you in, but actually, you know, tricks you. It's not in the film at all. But, you know, there's a lot to like in this film, and it's made by people who I think clearly like the Ghostbusters movies, and it's got wonderful performance in there, and it's got a good villain, a villain that did creep me out, the same way some of the ghost stuff creeped me out in the first two Ghostbusters movies. And as somebody who enjoys all the main Ghostbusters movies, I enjoyed this one as well. I do wish it was better. It's not great. It's good. It's okay. It's not great, and I do wish it felt more necessary, and I do wish that there was better character development, especially if they're going to make this into a trilogy. You know, they're going to make these sort of Ghostbusters Afterlife sequels into a trilogy where you're going to have Ghostbusters Afterlife, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and a third film that would connect to these two. I wish there was more character development, but I liked it because it felt like a family blockbuster. You know, a fun family blockbuster. And sometimes that's alright. That's alright to watch at the cinema. Not every film you see at the cinema has to be cinema. It has to be something that is so pure and so hot. It can only be this. Like, you get some people online nowadays going, this film is only good if it's a, you know, this film has to be a masterpiece, or otherwise it's terrible. But actually, some films are just entertaining. And this film was entertaining for me, for the most part. Some parts didn't really work for me, and some of the exposition scenes were quite dull. But this film was entertaining me for the most part. And if a film is entertaining, then it's clearly doing something right. And this film did something right for me. It entertained me, and it's a fun family blockbuster, which you don't feel like you get many of nowadays. A good, fun family blockbuster at that, you know? And I enjoyed it. I had a good time watching this film. And as I said before, I left the cinema humming the Ghostbusters song, you know, da-da-da-da-da, Ghostbusters, something strange in the neighborhood. I came out of the cinema humming that song. And I think that tells you everything you need to know. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. The reason I'm giving that rating is because I enjoyed the film. Any film I enjoy, I give it a 6 out of 10 or above. And I'm giving it a 6.5 out of 10 because I enjoyed it a little more than just enjoying it. I found it to be, a little better than enjoyable, but I still thought it had a lot of big problems, which is why I can't give it a 7 out of 10 or higher. And actually, one of the other kind of problems I had with this film was this storyline with Grace McKenna's character and this ghost girl who she develops a relationship with. That's an interesting idea, in my opinion. It feels like it's been done in another film. I can't quite put my finger on it. Ghost, I suppose. You know, Patrick Swayze. Anyway, the idea, it feels like it's been done before, but it hasn't been done in a Ghostbusters movie before, as far as I remember. So I liked that they went there in this film, but I didn't feel it was totally the best executed, and I felt some of the writing with those two characters when on screen together didn't totally work. Neither did the chemistry between those two characters. I didn't love that song in the film, and I wish that I did. And, you know, I didn't really love much of this film, but I enjoyed it. It's good fun. I'll probably go and watch it at the cinema again. Maybe. I'll see if I have time over the next couple of weeks. But it's a good, fun family blockbuster that made me smile, made me laugh, made me creeped out on a couple of scenes, and I left the cinema with swing in my step, humming the Ghostbusters song. And I thought seeing the original cast back, it just worked for me, that. And some of this film, it just made me smile. I liked it, even though I had some big problems with it. I liked it. I thought it was enjoyable, which was enough for me. And so, all in all, as I said before, and as I'm going to say once more in this podcast today, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is a 6.5 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, that's it for today's podcast. If you have seen Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, please let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below. Maybe you hated the film, or maybe you absolutely adored it. Whatever your thoughts are on Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, please let me know in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast. I'm looking forward to many more podcasts coming very, very soon on this channel. As what he said, thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast. And I suppose this is it. So I will see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.